that binder too?
No, I'm good.
You know what I do, actually? You might need to do that, but you can help yourself to mine. It's off. It's off. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission, our first joint planning commission and bicycle pedestrian, is it the advisory committee joint session. So thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have everybody who needs to be here. So so with that, I am going to kick off the meeting, and we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll start with a roll call. We'll go through the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee members and then to the Planning Commission. So,
Okay, thank you. All right, Committee Member Brown, Committee Member Murray, Committee Member Dragony, Committee Member Atherton, Committee Member Rendon, Committee Member Gator, Committee Member Foldenauer, sorry. And Committee Member Damon is, and also a Planning Commissioner, is absent this evening.
okay, and the Planning Commission?
Planning Commission, Commissioner Benjamin,
Here.
Commissioner Evans,
Here.
Vice Chair Holt,
Here.
and Chair Hernandez is also absent. Although it was mentioned that he would be teleconferencing, he is no longer doing that. He's absent.
Thank you very much. So with that, moving on to general public comment for any public comments that are not on the agenda tonight. If any members of the public wish to make general public comments, please speak now or forever hold your peace. Opening the public comment period. Closing. So we'll move into the public hearing period. So this is going into the meat of our agenda tonight. So thank you and welcome everybody to the first joint Half Moon Bay Planning Commission Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. Since it's the first time we've done this, I want to give a quick overview of kind of how we'll move through this item. We'll be receiving a report from staff, and once the staff report is complete, we'll be opening up to clarifying questions from the BPAC, and then moving on to the Planning Commission. And these should be just questions limited to clarifying additional information, that types of things, that needs to be any clarifying questions that need to be made of staff. And then once those questions are answered, we'll open up this item to general public comment. So on the item on the agenda, so if any member of the public would like to comment, there are speaker cards. We ask that you fill out a speaker card. You don't necessarily have to. But it helps us move through the public comment period, knowing which comments are coming forward. Once we close that public comment period, we'll bring the discussion back to the BPAC and the Planning Commission. Each member of the BPAC will have an opportunity to provide their comments, followed by the Planning Commission, and we'll conclude with staff next steps and any direction or anything like that that may continue, and then we'll continue the discussion on to July 11th. So this is the first of a series of focused meetings on the local coastal land use plan. So tonight's topic will be focused on Highway 1 and bicycle and pedestrian circulation. So this was a topic that was discussed extensively at the General Plan Advisory Committee, who ultimately felt that this particular topic warranted more discussion amongst the Planning Commission and the BPAC, and generally supported the concept of a town boulevard and Eastside Trail. So that's what we're here to discuss tonight. So with that, I know there's a lot of interest in a range of topics regarding the local coastal land use plan, and everything in this community is connected, and it all relates together, but this is the first in a series of meetings for us on the local coastal land use plan, and really important for us to stay focused on the topic at hand so we can work through this process deliberatively and efficiently. So as we spend the next number of months discussing the local coastal land use plan, the coastal access and recreation chapter will be discussed much more thoroughly at our July 11th meeting. So tonight's focus is really on the Highway 1 and bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So with that, looking forward to diving into the conversation, and just to sort of, I guess, set the tone, and we can all agree on, I guess, two basic facts in this town is that one, traffic can be terrible on the coast side, and two, bicycle and pedestrian access could be much better. So with that, hopefully we can improve both, and if nothing else, improve one without harming the other. So moving forward, happy to welcome Jill, Planning Manager Jill Akes, to give us our staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, and Vice Chair Holt, you covered so much of the background. I'll try to not be redundant. That was a great opening for us. As staff and our consultant team, we're very happy to be here tonight with the Planning Commission and our newly formed Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We'll be calling them the BPAC because it's a bit of a mouthful. Also presenting with me tonight will be Dara O'Byrne from Alta Planning and Design, and Hugh Louch is also here with Alta Planning and Design. He can help with fielding questions later. And the city's traffic engineer, Ray Rizavi, will be sharing a few things as well. The presentation will cover setting the stage from where the General Plan Advisory Committee left off with Plan Half Moon Bay, an overview of what a bicycle and pedestrian master plan is all about, and then the meat of our night, the character of Highway 1, the town boulevard concept, as well as some relationship to the bicycle and pedestrian planning in that corridor. So what is specifically the purpose of having this joint study session kicking off the topic of coastal access and recreation? Well, first up, the primary purpose is to pick up again where the General Plan Advisory Committee left off, and straight away in the next slide I'll get into that, and I think it'll be clear. But also, we have serendipity with two overlapping planning processes. The BPAC is overseeing a strategic implementation plan, and the Planning Commission is working on this policy document, and we felt it would be timely to provide a forum for some coordination, specifically around Highway 1, because it's foundational to transportation and coastal access planning in Half Moon Bay, regardless of what level you're planning for, implementation or at the policy level. We believe these two groups will inform each other. We also think having both of you here will possibly have invited and encouraged more folks to come, and we're happy about that. And we've been looking forward to hearing your dialogue. So now to the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee with a G. This is our 13-member council-appointed committee that has been meeting since early 2014, and they have been overseeing the preparation of the first public draft coastal land use plan and general plan elements. Always have to have a visual. This is the tome that they were working on. So they met 8 times from April 2016 to January 2017 to provide input on that document. And in their course of review, they made a number of important consensus statements, including 2 that set the agenda for this session. So first up, the Eastside Parallel Trail. This received resounding GPAC consensus. The General Plan Advisory Committee specified that this trail would extend from the north to south city limit, be located adjacent to the east side of Highway 1, but separated from it as a Class 1 dedicated multi-use bicycle and pedestrian trail. And now the character of Highway 1. So as for consensus on anything having to do with Highway 1, that has perhaps been the ultimate planning challenge in this process. John Dowdy and I have been meeting with the GPAC for some time, and we've noted in a few of those meetings that we've basically seen the full range of comments on Highway 1. 2 lanes, 4 lanes, lots of signals, no signals, roundabouts, grade separated crossings, etc., etc. In working on the coastal access and recreation revision, the working draft that the Planning Commission is now going to be working with, I got the opportunity to recomb through all the comments, and I finally noticed that there was a consensus in there. Absolutely no one said, I like Highway 1 and I want you to keep it exactly the way it is. So there we are. And our last meeting with the GPAC, this concept of a town boulevard, of having a roadway that was more suited to the purposes of the community, safe for all modes, a lower design speed and actual speeds that would enhance the scenic quality of Half Moon Bay. It wasn't clear as to the full extent. Primarily the discussion included a focus between North and South Main Street, but that was how it was fleshed out. And also in their statement was, we would like this to be further explored with the Planning Commission, by the Planning Commission. And so here we are. That's why we're starting here. Now, Dara with Alta is going to provide, similar to that overview of Plan Half Moon Bay, she's going to provide an overview of a bicycle and pedestrian master plan.
Thank you, Jill. Just to begin, we wanted to give an explanation of what a bicycle and pedestrian master plan is, so we can provide that context, because this is our first time in front of Planning Commission, and to give context to the audience as well. So ultimately, the bicycle and pedestrian master plan will provide recommendations for the city for bicycle and pedestrian networks to improve safety, comfort, and connectivity. And so the plan itself will include an overview of existing conditions. It'll build on the policies of Plan Half Moon Bay and the local land use plan, and will ultimately come up with a recommended network. And that recommended network will have a series of prioritized projects, so a list of projects that could be implemented over time. And they will be prioritized from a timing perspective, will provide cost estimates and funding options. So it's really a tool to begin implementation. So it provides an overview kind of vision for the bicycle pedestrian network within the city. And how are we going to do this? We have started the process. We're working on engaging the community throughout the process. And as mentioned, we're going to be building on the policies that the city has already developed and incorporating those to help guide our planning process. We're evaluating existing conditions. That's the phase of work that we're in right now. And then we're going to be assessing the overall needs of bicycle and pedestrian needs within the community. And that will result in the recommended network and help us come up with that draft plan. And this is just an overview of the schedule. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I do just want to highlight the community engagement. We are working with the BPAC as mentioned. We are going to be having some public workshops. We'll also be attending existing community events. We're doing stakeholder interviews and really working to make sure that we're getting everybody's input throughout the process. So as mentioned, we're building on Plan Half Moon Bay, and one of the guiding principles that we have been referencing is this guiding principle number 4, which is draft, but it states to promote pedestrian, bicycle, and transit mobility, increased connectivity between the city's neighborhoods, and enhanced coastal and open space access. So really those concepts of mobility, safety, and connectivity. And so that kind of brings us to why we're here tonight, because all of our conversations to date, both with staff and the community, all of those key issues really have come up with Highway 1. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill and then to Ray. Okay. Okay.
I just want to cue one thing up for Ray. Yeah. Okay. So Ray's going to, Ray Razavi, our traffic engineer, already mentioned, Ray's going to review a couple projects that are already underway because we're predicting that folks will have questions about those, and so we're just going to go ahead and preemptively do that and hopefully reassure some folks about that as well, because there's been some recent design changes pursuant to City Council. And then Dara's going to host quite a show of different ideas for Town Boulevard Concept. Okay, Ray, you are on.
Good evening. My name is Ray Razavi, and I'm with the Engineering Division. Happy to be here and talking about my favorite project, Highway 1. This is a two-project combo. It's a Highway 1 North and Highway 1 South. Each one of these two projects has a new signalized intersection. The North project has one at Terrace Avenue, and then the South project has a new intersection at South Main Street. So if you're looking at Highway 1, the two projects are, the first one is Highway 1 South and extends from 92 to just south of South Main Street at Wavecrest. This is about a $3.5 million project. Most of the improvements is connected to South Main Street, a new signalized intersection. This is about $3.5 million. Highway 1 North extends from Highway 92, or mostly North Main Street, and continues on north to Spindrift. I'm going to explain what these two projects consist of. Each of them is about $3.5 million. The Highway 1 North is going to be a little bit more expensive because we're adding some pedestrian bicycle multi-path on the east side. The Highway 1 South, most of the improvements is at intersection of South Main Street. This is where we're going to have a new intersection. This is Highway 1. This is to the right is north, to the left, south. This is South Main Street. Currently, we have a Higgins Canyon Road that comes into this intersection. Is not signalized currently. If you're coming northbound on Highway 1, you have this high-speed turn going onto South Main, and this is a very dangerous turn for us. We have bicyclists coming down on Higgins Canyon Road, and they have a conflict here with the high-speed cars coming onto South Main Street. So we're going to put a new intersection here. What this will provide us is access, east and west access, so you can access the Naomi Patich Trail, and also reconfigure this intersection, take out the northbound off-ramp, the high-speed off-ramp here. And this will create an entry spot for the city. We'll have a new city sign, nautical theme, and right-turning vehicles have to come to the intersection, stop before making a smooth right turn at low speed. So that way we will have a better connection with the Higgins Canyon and less of a conflict with any bicyclists that would come down into the intersection. So we will have crossings at the new signals, so people coming in bicycling and walking could access Naomi Patch Trail. The north portion of the project, which basically goes north of 92 all the way up to Spindrift towards Rue Français and the next signal up here, we're going to add a new signal at Terrace Avenue. That's the first thing we're going to do. So this new signal would be located at the intersection of Terrace Avenue. This is Highway 1. To the right is north, left is south. What you see up here in blue also is frontage road. The frontage road currently, on the south side of the frontage road, it terminates before Terrace Avenue. So we're going to extend the frontage road and bring it to the intersection. So that way we're going to eliminate this connection that also crosses the Naomi Passage Trail that goes parallel to the highway. So we're going to eliminate this crossing, which would make it safer, bring the frontage road in to a safe crossing at the signalized intersection. We're also going to create another connection down south, so we're going to take out another unsafe condition and a conflict with Naomi Patridge Trail. So improving the Naomi Patridge Trail. We're also going to put an east side multi-use path on the next to Highway 1. So if this is Terrace Avenue, to the left goes to Main Street, and you can see a lot of people walking between Terrace Avenue currently and North Main Street. We will be building 2 retaining walls here. So one retaining wall would be holding the new widened highway, which would have a new standard shoulder now, which is right now the shoulder is less than 8 feet, which is the standard for Caltrans. So we're going to widen the shoulder, put a retaining wall there, and put another retaining wall lower and put a 10-foot path. So this path would come from North Main Street all the way to Terrace Avenue. What the council has asked us to do and what we support is extending this path northbound past Terrace Avenue. So we're going to extend this actually to go to Grandview, cross Grandview, and go further north to Spindrift. We have 2 grant applications in place to extend it past Spindrift. Our ultimate goal is to take it all the way to Rue Français to connect with the existing path on the east side of the highway. So we will take it from Spindrift to Frenchman's Creek. That's one project that we put a grant in. And then take it from Frenchman's Creek to Rue Français, across the creek, build a bridge, and that's a second project that we were asking for grants. So those are the 2 projects that are in the works, and hopefully if we get the funding, we can continue the east side path. Absolutely. So as part of also Highway 1 North, I said this is going to be a much bigger project than the south. The south is mostly concentrated on South Main intersection. Highway 1 North is not only the intersection at Terrace Avenue, but we're widening the shoulder, and we're also extending the 2-lane transition to 1 lane further north. If you drive Highway North now, when you pass North Main Street, you will see how 2 lanes come to 1 lane and it backs up through North Main Street intersection. We're going to increase the length of the 2-lane north of North Main. We're going to take it past Grandview. We were going to take it even further, but the council asked us not to extend it to Kehoe or Spindrift because of crossing would be more difficult for people coming out from, let's say, Grandview, and they want to make a left turn. They would have to cross 2 northbound lanes instead of 1. So before Grandview, we can transition to 1 lane, but we're going to extend it from the existing North Main Street all the way to right before Grandview. So this Highway 1 project, the 2 projects, as I mentioned, the first part is about $3.5 million on the south side, because it basically involves just the intersection. The north side involves the intersection plus the Terrace Avenue intersection, plus the widening, plus the 10-foot path on the east side. We are hoping that Highway 1 in the future on the south side, we will be able to put in an east side path. But at this time, that's not in the works. We're concentrating on the north side first to get that completed. So we are going to have an east side parallel trail. We're going to have a best pedestrian practices as in high visibility crosswalks, refuge space in the median, crossing speed, we're taking it down to about 3.5 feet per second. For bicycles, we will have video detectors. Right now, we have loop detectors in the ground, and they can't really detect bicycles. So we will have video detectors. We would have better signage on the pavement. We will also, in addition, will make sure that every crossing, we would have bicycles be able to cross during the green time. Because right now, we had to do adjustments to some of the intersections. For the cross streets, bicycles did not have enough time to pass the green. So we'll make sure that the green accommodates that. So if there's no pedestrians and the green doesn't go on for the pedestrians to cross, the bicycles will not usually have enough time to cross at a low speed. So we want to make sure that they have enough time. We will have better transit stops. We would have pullouts for the bus stations, for the bus stops, and we will have adequate shoulders. We're going to have at least the minimum amount of shoulder, which is 8 feet. Right now, if you go on Highway 1, the shoulder varies. Some places 8 feet, some places 4 feet, some places it's 3 feet. Some places when you go across a creek is actually non-existent. And that is very problematic for us. So we want to make sure we have adequate shoulders. So if a bicyclist does not want to go on a Class 1 path, they want to ride with the flow of the traffic, they'll be able to be accommodated in the shoulders. Concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ray. So, building on the town boulevard concept that Jill mentioned and Ray spoke of, from the bicycle and pedestrian master plan perspective, you know, in its current form, Highway 1 is really acting as a barrier in terms of it's preventing safe and comfortable access for bicycles and pedestrians, and it really is disconnecting communities from each other. It's disconnecting people from the beach, from the coastal access, and from downtown and other amenities. But this is also really an opportunity through this planning process, through the process that you're going through, both through the general plan and the local coastal land use plan. It's really an opportunity with the projects that Ray just presented to really think about those things that were important to the community about improving safety and this idea of exploring this town boulevard concept, especially when you start thinking about things like gateways and beautifying Highway 1 so it becomes really more representative of the community, and really it becomes an opportunity to improve multimodal access and connectivity for the community instead of just a pass-through. So when we're considering this concept from the perspective of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, but also for the city as a whole, there are 3 things that I'm going to kind of highlight and ask you to think about as I'm presenting a bunch of examples to you. So one is design speed. This is important because one of the things we've heard is that, you know, some folks would like to see slower speeds on Highway 1. And if slower speeds are desired, then the overall design of the highway needs to be considered. The California Manual for Setting Speed Limits, really, you can't just change the speed limit. You also have to design the road so that it's appropriate for the speeds that people are going. We're also looking at intersection designs, and from this perspective, again, it's how are pedestrians able to get across? Do they have enough time? Do they feel comfortable? Is it safe? But also for bicycles as well. And then thinking about community identity. What are some of these other communities that I'm going to be showing you? What kind of things have they considered as they were working with Caltrans to redesign the roads going through their communities, whether that's through beautification, wayfinding, signage, landscaping, things like that. So now I just have a series. I'm going to go pretty quickly through them so I don't take up too much time, but just a series of examples. These are all state route or state highways that have been improved to address some of these issues that we're talking about. None of them are exactly like Highway 1 through Half Moon Bay, because it's a unique corridor, it's a unique community, but they all have something, I think, just for consideration. So the first one is Bridgeport, California, US 395. This is what it looked like before, two lanes in each direction with a left turn lane. And after the improvements, the residents really wanted to make it more attractive for both residents and tourists. So they reconfigured the road. They now have 2 through lanes, a center turn lane. They have some back and angle parking and bike lanes. And one of their goals really was reduction in vehicle speed. So again, this is the redesign of the road to reduce speeds. And this is what it looks like now. Again, you can see the improved pedestrian crosswalk. Again, not the same condition as Half Moon Bay, but just an example. On State Route 99, this is an example of some concentrated both pedestrian and bicycle improvements. So in this case, they put in some curb extensions, which extend the curb out so that pedestrians have a shorter distance to cross. They improved the crosswalks with some textured concrete, and then they also added some flashing lights for pedestrian crossings. This is an improved bike lane with buffered, and they wanted it in their community's character, so you can see that it's, you know, a stamped concrete again. And one of their priorities was really improving crossings for seniors. So you can see that here, that again, you're reducing the length. They allowed for more time so that their safety was really improved. This is an overhead view. You can see those curb extensions. Those are the kind of bulb outs of the sidewalk. And then this is just another view of those crosswalks in the buffered lane. So one example in San Francisco, again, more urban, but just some things for consideration. This is the road before with a median. Here you can see some of the improvements that were initiated by Caltrans. Again, they wanted to reduce the speed on Highway 35. So they also did curb extensions. They had advanced stops. They reduced the speed limit, and they had some buffered bike lanes. And again, this is changing the width of the overall vehicle lanes. And they studied the before and after, and they did see a reduction in both vehicle speeds and collisions with these improvements. On US 101, this was a simpler kind of improvement where they extended, on the left is the then, on the right is the now. They widened the shoulder and colorized it. Again, you know, they were really thinking about the character of the area. And so you can see the improvement for bicycles. They went for a 10-foot shoulder, and it is that more terracotta coloring. And just a quick example in Oakland on Highway 185. Again, you can see they really wanted to improve the pedestrian crossing, so they shortened it with these curb extensions, improved crosswalks, center landscaping to really improve the overall character, and then the median refuge island, and Ray was speaking about that as, you know, a safe place to stop in case you need to stop in midway through the crossing. Highway 1, just another example of improved crosswalk design, center landscaping, more pedestrian activated beacons. So a lot of pedestrian improvements on this one with a center median. El Camino Real, again, much more urban, but just another example of Caltrans and the community working together for improvements. You can see improved crosswalks, center landscaping, again, trying to improve the overall character, and then the median refuge island. Here's another example in Kings Beach, State Route 28. This is the before with 2 lanes in each direction, and the after is 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane, bike lanes, improved sidewalks, and then a roundabout. So these are just some examples for considerations to help inform the conversation as you continue forward with us as a community. Some of the things to continue to think about and ask as you're thinking about this Town Boulevard concept is to really think about how can we improve safety on Highway 1 and crossing Highway 1? How can we reduce speeds? How can we improve connectivity? How can we improve coastal access? That's what you're really talking about here. tonight, how can we create a unique identity and gateway for Half Moon Bay? What do those opportunities look like, and what do you as a community want to come together and decide? And with that, I will turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. We again want to emphasize that there was not a singular example that coincided with the condition of Half Moon Bay. So you noted a lot of those roadways have development right up to them. It's quite a bit of a different context. Nonetheless, we were inspired by how all of these roadways are Caltrans facilities that were having context-sensitive design approaches implemented. And that's something that Caltrans is supposed to stand by. And so every single time we say that and here that's a Caltrans standard, you have to do it. I just want to encourage us to remember that we can advocate for something appropriate for this community, and your staff is behind you to do that. So that's obviously a lot to think about. And as Vice Chair Holt reviewed, this is the order of operations before us. We're looking to answer any clarifying questions from the BPAC and Planning Commission before holding a community input period, and then a BPAC and Planning Commission discussion, which Vice Chair Holt will facilitate. And if possible, we would love to get a little bit of Planning Commission direction tonight, although we recognize that you might not be ready to do that, and that's fine. But in particular, we're focused on perhaps tonight or in your next meeting, confirmation from the Planning Commission with respect to the General Plan Advisory Committee's consensus statement, so that we know we can firmly and comfortably move forward on this Eastside Parallel Trail, which we expect you to support, and also to give us feedback on whether or not we continue to pursue exploring the Town Boulevard concept. And with that, we would like to stand aside and see if you have any clarifying questions.
Great, thank you very much. So again, we'll take just some clarifying questions just to get additional input from staff. Not necessarily our time to offer opinions or weigh in, but just additional information, then we'll move into the public comment period. So I think the most orderly way to do this is just sort of move around the horseshoe here. So, so starting with BPAC member Brown. If you could, I'm sorry, if you could please make sure to speak into the microphone where everything's videotaped. And
Okay. I have a question about the retaining wall concept. What is that? Can you just explain a little bit?
So the retaining wall is, as the name implies, you retain, it's actually retaining earth. You have a difference in elevation. Highway 1 currently, if you go north of North Main Street, and you heading north on Highway 1, if you look at to the right, you have a slope down to the properties. So if you want to widen this roadway, there are two ways to doing this. You either have to buy more property, so you would have a slope that would contain the earth if you're going to extend it to the right as you're going north, or you have to build a wall to retain the earth, so that way you would have a difference in elevation, so something has to hold up the roadway. You can't put the roadway down all the way in the bottom. You have to be at the same level, so that's for the shoulder. So we're going to put one retaining wall next to the widened shoulder to hold up the shoulder on the right side as you're going north. Now, you need another retaining wall to hold up the 10-foot path. And that retaining wall doesn't have to be as high as the first retaining wall, because the path doesn't have to be at the same level as the highway. It's actually much nicer if it's a different level, so you would have more of, quiet without, all the noise coming directly from the cars passing next to you. So it's more desirable to have a bit of an elevation change. So you put a retaining wall. It's cheaper also to put it a little shorter, because the 10-foot path could actually go somewhere in height between the houses and the level of the highway.
Okay. I have a related question. At least in my mind, it's related. I've seen a lot of materials, read through stuff, and we consider class 1, class 2, class 3, but there's also a class 4 from what I understand, which has barriers, posts, or some other kind of barrier between the path and the roadway. Is that possible to consider? You allowed to do that?
So this is the roadway here.
Hey, excuse me, Jill. For our television watching audience, is there a way to make sure that they can be informed on this?
Okay. All right. Okay. So right now we talked about the retaining wall. So right now we have. Thank you. So right now we have a very small shoulder. So we're going to extend the shoulder number 1, and then we're going to put this retaining wall with a foundation here. So this dirt here could be retained and is not going to fall off instead of what we have right now, which is dirt going at an angle. It could be 30-degree angle, 45-degree angle, depending on the type of earth. So we will put a retaining wall. This is a concrete retaining wall with a foundation, and this is the existing houses. So we're going to put another retaining wall right here, and this would take the 10-foot path at the lower level, and it's gonna, you're looking north, so this is on the east side. Now on the west side you have the Naomi Patridge Trail, which is at the same level as the highway, and we're not gonna need any more retaining walls on the left side except in certain areas, because we will have to widen this shoulder as well. But if you have the right-of-way, which most likely the Caltrans right-of-way extends all the way to here, we will be okay and not have to incur the cost of the retaining wall. Now, on the classes of bikeways, we have class 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you're looking at top down on a highway or on a roadway, this is the direction of travel. So class 1 is if you have an actual separation with the roadway for this multi-use or the bicycle path. So I could put the bicycle path over here, meandering or parallel to the roadway, but there is a separation with the roadway. So this is called a class 1. A class 2 is actually a bikeway that's on the roadway. It could be preferably 5 foot wide, and it's adjacent to the vehicles. This is called a class 2. Class 3 is when you actually don't have anything. You just say, okay, bicyclists, you just ride with the cars, with the vehicles. This would be a class 3. You just ride with all the other cars. And class 4 is if you take this class 2 bikeway and you put a bit of a separation here, and even better, you put some flexible delineator that would actually alarm the cars that you are now separated physically. Now this separation could be striped, it could be an actual raised, some kind of a platform, it could be a different type of treatment, it could be concrete, it could be colored asphalt. So something that the vehicles know you're actually separated with the roadway. Now all these 4 classes are now identified in Caltrans. This is brand new for Caltrans, especially the class 4. They always had class 1, 2, and 3. But class 4 is becoming more and more popular because a lot of the bicyclists, not all bicyclists would prefer class 1. I prefer class 1. I'm very cautious. I prefer not to be riding next to the cars. But a lot of bicyclists, especially the ones that are really active, they like to ride along with traffic, but I have a bit of a separation to kind of create that barrier for them.
Thank you very much. Commissioner or Committee Member Murray?
Just to dovetail a little bit onto that, I think maybe a consideration that hopefully could be made is the distinction of the Class 1 trail as it is right now. If you've ridden on the bike path between Frenchman's Creek and Rocket Farms, the new trail that's on the east side of the road there, if you're a bicyclist and you're on that path, it's actually a pretty inefficient trail as it is. There's at least 8, maybe 10 stop signs. that, and some of them are in succession of 30 yards away from each other. So, I mean, I've never seen anybody actually stop at all these stop signs. I've never stopped at all these stop signs. But in theory, the stop signs are there, so you are obligated to stop, you know, put your foot down and continue. And for a bike rider that's actually going from point A to point B and not just on a scenic tour, that's very difficult. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen the specs of the trail in between downtown and to Terrace or beyond to Frenchman's Creek, but I would just consider that a class 1, although I agree is much safer, as a cyclist it's very tricky to actually get places on there. If you've gone on the Naomi Patridge Trail southbound, the same effect comes into play at BK Motors, there's several stops there that everybody just rides through the stop sign. So most opt to stay on the shoulder of the road and just ride in the bike lane. So that's you know, something that certainly I've noticed, and it should be maybe considered in that scenario. And one thing, just I know the discussion's really on sort of the northbound access, and maybe this is out of the purview of this discussion, but the real hot spot really, in my opinion, is between Kelly going northbound to Highway 92. If you're a cyclist, that area is completely confusing.
So if I could, there'll be an opportunity for actual discussion. This time's really for more clarifying questions. So if we can just, I'll try to morph your comments into a clarifying question, and maybe if Jill can sort of comment, or Ray, about to what extent consideration of uninterrupted trails have been included in some of those discussions. I think I heard Ray in sort of relocating some of those trail disruptions at Terrace or some of those other areas. So I think you addressed some of that, correct?
That's not what we have at the moment. The Naomi Patridge Trail has a lot of interruptions, more on the north side than on the south side. Once you go south of Kelly, there are less interruptions, but there still are interruptions. And we could make those interruptions more safe in the future, possibly by implementing some additional measures. For Highway 1 North, as I discussed, we're going to take out a few of those interruptions, at least 2, maybe 3 of them as a minimum. It is true, if you go on a class 4 bicycle, that would be best in terms of if you want to go from point A to point B, as opposed on a class 1. Class 1 bicycle on the north side, we do have several interruptions, you know, stop signs, and most bicyclists don't stop at stop signs. It's not just about the trails, even in the city. If you drive around the city and you see bicyclists, a majority of them don't stop at stop signs. And most of the enforcement is about, okay, bicyclists, at least, you know, slow down, look around, make sure you're safe. Maybe you're not stopping all the way, but make sure that you cross into intersections safely. So be aware of your surroundings. Just don't go zoom through it at the regular speed through the stop signs. As far as having trails without interruptions, then I would say the best trails we have now is the coastal trail. I mean, they have the least amount of interruption, but they're not parallel to the roads. They're not very conducive to commuting. And today I was going on Highway 92, and I saw bicyclists going on 92 across the top grade, and that's something I would not do. But I understand a lot of people, you know, there's no other way to get across the top. So I hope that we had trails that connected all communities. We are planning to do more and more trails in the future. It's just a matter of funding, and I'm hoping that Caltrans, with their new bike task force that they have, they would provide us at least better assistance.
Very good, thank you. So moving forward, any additional clarifying questions? Committee member Dragney.
So I don't understand why I disagree with your observation that the coastal trail is not good for commuting. I've been doing it for a decade, maybe 45,000 miles on it. I won't, the Naomi Patridge Trail, the stop signs, they're not, you can't use them. Even if you were to stop, to look left at somebody who's going 55 miles an hour, you're never going to beat them as they come around the corner. The only thing you can do is to keep moving through those signs and hope that somebody doesn't hit you. The entire design, it just doesn't work. But the coastal trail, if you can get everybody safely across the highway to the coastal trail and actually maintain the coastal trail at 10 to 12 feet, and I think I see some nodding heads here, that's what the locals, I won't use that trail on Highway 1.
Very good. I just, again, if we can sort of reserve some of those types of comments for the actual, for the more BPAC Planning Commission discussion, if there.
It was
like I
actually
say,
a
just
question.
questions for additional.
It was actually a question why we're not considering the coastal trail as the main corridor for bicycling north to south.
Okay, fair enough. We'll add that to the list of questions. Additional technical questions for staff.
Yes, thank you.
So
my questions, I have a couple questions for Ray on the existing Highway 1 plans. If the grant applications are unsuccessful, where will that East Side Trail end? Could you clarify that a little bit? I was a little unclear on that. And then I'm not sure if you mentioned anything about project timeline, so was curious about that as well.
Sure. First, as far as the trail goes, the City Council asked us to extend the trail. At the time that we designed the project, the trail was to be start at North Main Street to Grandview, or just short of Grandview. Now, based on the response from the City Council, we are extending it to Spindrift. From Spindrift to Frenchman's Creek, we are applying to Transportation Development Act, Article 3. Hopefully we will get that funding within the next year. The project itself is currently in final design. We will be preparing the plans to have the community review it before we take it to City Council with this modification. We have been working with Caltrans in order to get a permit, because this is Caltrans right away, and even though the funding doesn't come from Caltrans, it doesn't come from the state, it doesn't come from the federal, the funding is local San Mateo County Transportation Authority funding, and we still have to get permit from Caltrans. So the permit process has been taking a long time. With this change in the design per council's directions, we will have to go back to Caltrans once the council and the community accepts the changes. We are hoping that by end of this year, we will complete that and go to construction hopefully next year. However, on the south side, it's a little faster. The council told us to go ahead with the new intersection on the south of 101, south of Highway 1 at South Main Street, and that project is into the final phase of getting Caltrans permit, and we can probably advertise that project beginning of 2018 or end of this year. It will be ready to go for construction advertising.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right time for this question, but we went through extremely quickly an example of a roundabout, and I'm very curious to know more about how that would be expected to function here, or if that's something that's for our discussion.
I know the General Plan Advisory Committee had many conversations about roundabouts. Jill, do you want to address that quickly, or the pros and cons, or the thinking, or?
What we looked at with the General Plan Advisory Committee was in context of where they might be appropriate, and acknowledging that the Mid-Coast Plan, the Connect the Coast Side work, was studying a few north of us, and we looked at some geometries for two-lane roundabouts that would be 2 lanes in each direction, and we actually had that profiled in a, well, it wasn't profiled, it was site planned, and we recognized that we don't have enough right-of-way for that type of roundabout, that big of a roundabout, to fit on our roadway. 1 lane in each direction. That was the Kings Beach example. I personally really like those. I'm very, very familiar with them coming from Seattle, and just there's roundabouts here and there and everywhere. And they could work probably farther north is what we were thinking about, and that's why we showed you that example. We actually demonstrated a roundabout at the Planning Commission retreat, and how you cross it if you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist. So there's things that we can bring back to the BPAC at a future meeting separately, and then of course the Planning Commission will make their request for more information as well. But that's sort of where we are with roundabouts. Is that a good? Okay.
Hey, very good. Committee Member Rendon?
Yeah, no questions. They've been answered.
Great, thank you. Committee Member Gator?
Thank you for the presentations. They're really helpful, and especially this diagram, which answered most of my questions about different classes of bike lanes. So my question is about how do we promote the use of these new trails or extension to existing trails in terms of signage, directional, particularly for tourists when they arrive in town and have no clue where to go?
So that's a great question. I'm assuming that would be part of either the bicycle trails master plan or the Parks and Recreation master plan. I'm seeing nods from staff over there, so I think that's the answer there. Is that would be something that's being discussed? Yeah. So Committee Member Foldenau, is that correct? Great. Thank you very much. So moving over into the Planning Commission, Planning Commissioner Benderman.
Yes, thanks. Several questions. So first, there was a picture of the right-of-way changes in the area north of North Main Street, and I just wanted to be clear. It was the schematic with the two side-by-sides, and I wanted to be clear. It looked like the 4 lanes were in the northbound direction were extending through Grandview, if I read the diagram properly. And so I'm trying to and I may be wrong, so you can clarify that. If that's the case, turn southbound from Grandview onto Highway 1 South, they have to cross 2 lanes of northbound traffic and then merge into how many lanes of southbound traffic?
You're correct. What I'm showing you currently is what was presented to the City Council. And as with the comments from the City Council, we made a modification to the northbound lanes. So originally we were going to extend it past Grandview and then merge into 1 lane before Spindrift. Based on the comments received from the City Council and during the meeting, we were asked to reduce the transition to before Grandview. So if you're coming out of Grandview, you will be crossing 1 lane
In each direction.
1 lane, yes. You're making a left turn. You'll be crossing 1 lane on the northbound, and then you will enter your own lane.
So you have a protected lane. You're at the beginning of the number 1 lane in the southbound direction.
So from that point on, we would have 2 lanes going southbound.
Okay, that's
Before Grandview, you would have 1 lane on southbound. At Grandview, it would turn into 2 lane. One of those lanes would be the protected lane to receive the left turning movement from Grandview.
Okay, I didn't get that in the picture, but the clarification is very helpful. That was my understanding of what the council had requested, and I just wasn't here, so I wanted to be sure.
We don't have we do have the engineering plans reflecting that. We just haven't created the beautiful blue.
No, I'm good with that.
Colorful version yet.
The public is watching, and we want to be sure that we're delivering what we heard.
We promised to the council that we will do that, and we have done that. So
I bet they're happy to hear that. So let's see. Then there was a question about the types of pedestrian crossings, the high visibility pedestrian crossings. And one of the topics that I had heard bounced around during the GPAC conversation was the feasibility of these bright beacon flashes that recognize that a bike or a ped is going to cross. And there was some question as to whether Caltrans would allow things like that on Highway 1. Is there definitive information about that? Because it looked encouraging from some of the examples I saw that it might be possible.
Well, the crossing we're proposing, these are controlled crossing at the intersection with a full signal.
Right, I'm not asking, I'm just
Right.
wondering what's feasible. I get that that may not be part of the picture right now.
Correct. So we don't have any other crossings currently proposed on Highway 1 except at the signalized intersections.
Hypothetically.
Yes, but if you do want to have a crossing, then we would have to make a proposal to Caltrans. And traditionally, uncontrolled crossing on a highway at a high speed is very dangerous,
I
as you
understand.
know. And there has been many, as you know, in California, and a lot of them has been wiped out because they understand that they either have to make it safe or they have to remove it. So for Highway 1, all we have now is signalized intersection, safe crossing.
Right.
Butt in on my colleague. So I am going to butt in on Ray because before this meeting, Dara and I had a conversation about crossings that Ray didn't get to enjoy. So if we can expand on that.
I mean, I think what Ray's referencing is right, which is that you theoretically possible, yes, but it's all about the design of the facility and the type of the facility that you have that you're trying to cross. So certain facilities are certainly not allowed, you know, access controlled, separated type facilities, other facilities that are conventional highways, you know, slower speeds certainly allowed. And then when you get in between, you want to be very careful with your design decisions to make sure you're considering the safety kinds of issues. But it is possible on Caltrans facilities.
Thank you, and I want to be clear, I'm not making an opinion and advocating about this. I just want to understand the feasible. That's why it seemed like a relevant question. As long as I've got you up here, it looked to me like in many of the examples that we saw of before and afters, they involved a road diet. And what we're advocating in many of these areas is actually the opposite of a road diet. In some areas, we're going from 1 lane to 2 lanes. And I'm wondering if there are areas within this town boulevard concept where you are asking us to think clean sheet about that.
And
In
now
other
you're
words,
talking
are
about
you-
the specific plans that you have now, or are you talking about sort of just more general?
In the context of a town boulevard, are you asking us to be open to the possibility that a town boulevard isn't 2 lanes from, you know, one part of town to another part of town, that we'd rather use some of that right-of-way for town boulevard-y things that are not maximizing throughput?
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's a really important consideration that you and the council obviously should be thinking about is what is the priority as you start to think about moving traffic through versus circulation locally versus bicycle and pedestrian travel in and around. You know, thinking about the timing of when you have traffic is a big consideration, I think, for your town and important to consider there. So yeah, from our perspective, you know, we're taking direction from staff and from you all to look at different types of concepts, but certainly that would be something that would be on the table and we're thinking about. Yeah, right. Yeah, so one thing, you know, whether you're thinking kind of 4 lanes or 2 lanes, that's only sort of part of the equation that determines how fast traffic is going to move. So when you're thinking about the design speed question, you're also going to think about lane widths, and you're going to think about shoulder widths. You're going to think about all kinds of other factors that go into that might have an impact.
Then just one last question, and then I'll skip ahead. So I think of these as multimodal. I mean, we talk about it like it's bikes. We see people that are occasionally walking, they're strollers, there are people with their dogs. Can you comment on and any of you in staff, I don't mean to suggest it should be you, I don't know, on whether we have, you know, the ideas of these lanes are adequate for all of that multimodal alternatives, you know, the guys on the electric skateboards, you know, which I understand are part of the landscape on these trails legally now. I want to be sure that we're thinking, you know, in a broad way, and maybe the Bikes Committee has done a lot of thinking about this, and love to hear from them during comment time, but staff may have thought about it as well, so I wanted to get that in this space.
Yeah, you know, I think for Class 1 facilities in particular can accommodate certain types of electric vehicles are permitted by right. You can sort of, there are different rules that cities can apply to restrict that if they desire, but they're certainly allowed by right. From a design perspective, generally you're talking about when you have more users, more types of users, you think about width for class 1 as the big
Bicycle trail per cheesy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you much, Commissioner Benjamin. Commissioner Evans.
Jill, you made a reference to the highway, and you've started to answer it for me, and I don't want to ask a question that takes a long time to answer. You talked about that there's the design considerations to change the traffic speeds. I'm assuming we're going to hear more about that as this goes forward, and it's not something we need to talk about right now. Is that true?
I think what we're looking for at your policy planning level is general direction about this town boulevard concept, and you are all around it with these questions. I don't believe our planning process for the LCLUP is going to come up with a finalized town boulevard vision. I think it's going to require ongoing exploration and implementation phase. There's also a real opportunity in your environmental review process to assess alternatives. For example, a road diet alternative, if there's a span of the highway that you think could manage to be narrowed. So there's a wide range of options coming forward, and where you are and what you just said about do we have to work all the way through that right now? We don't, but we do need some general direction so that we understand how, for example, the bike and ped plan will interrelate to this and the policies as a whole.
So then what you're asking us to decide as a community, I guess, is we'd like Highway 1 speeds to be slower, 20 or 30 miles an hour rather than 50 or 60. And I'm assuming there's data, because I've seen it before, that supports that the same number of cars will get from A to B at the same time at these different speed ratios. So we're not inconveniencing the drivers. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Also, I noticed that the design of these intersections seem fairly complete. If the schematics seem finished and you're doing what I would call construction drawings for that now. Is this something the Planning Commission actually sees? You talked about different design ideas and gateway things and stuff like that. Is that to come back to us, or we haven't seen it so far? So
you're going to see this, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess just two quick questions. Maybe if you could give just a quick summary from a 30,000 foot level, but just how this effort relates to some of the broader transportation planning efforts on the coast side. We'll connect the coast side, others, and just, I guess, maybe a nod and a consideration that that those plans are being considered and sort of factored in, or?
They have been, and I personally participated on the technical advisory committee with the Connect the Coast Side county staff, and we've attended, I think, all of their workshops. They've been quiet for a while, and I understand they've been doing a lot of work in the background, and we check in with staff over there. So as soon as they make another step, we'll get involved again, and we'll bring updates to you if it looks like they're pertinent to work that you're doing.
And so I guess just my other question would just be the stretch of Highway 92 going to the east, and to what extent similar considerations would be made on Highway 92, or just how that would factor in?
I think that's an absolutely fair question. We didn't bring that to you specifically tonight, but the kinds of things that you're talking about for Highway 1 could be considered. Of course, Half Moon Bay's stretch of Highway 92 ends at Spanish Town. We did extend the quote-unquote planning area for what you're looking at in this update. That doesn't mean that we can set a determinate plan for lands outside of our boundaries, but it would be more of an advocacy approach to anything east of your city limit.
Okay, very good. So With that, and barring any additional clarifying questions, would like to open it up to the public for public comments. And I did receive a request to make sure that all speakers use the microphones, please, and talk into them more clearly. So if we can make... So I have one public comment speaker cards. I just have a hunch that we might have more public speakers. So maybe if you could just raise your hand so we could get a sense of who intends to speak. Okay, great. So so with that, we'll go ahead and open up the public comment period, and I'll start with the first person to play by the rules, Walter Sensing. Please come bring your comments.
Accused of playing by the rules.
I know, we learn as we get older, don't we?
Sure. My name's Walter Sensing. I'm a resident of Half Moon Bay, and I want to just briefly tonight present some thoughts I've had on how we could try to reduce the amount of traffic, particularly on Highway 1, but of course 92 as well. And my thoughts are pretty much centered around trying to, are twofold. One is trying to launch some type of shuttle service that is more comprehensive than what the county is currently floating for us. It'd be a lot more comprehensive. It would involve putting in a couple of parking lots at the north end and the south end of town, and possibly trying to find something on the east side where we could have out-of-town visitors who come in, park for free, utilize shuttles that we could provide to come into town and then circulate within the coast side, and to pay for this because it would be, I suspect, fairly expensive. I'd like to suggest that we look at adopting permit parking for weekends and holidays on most streets in Half Moon Bay on the west side, and for neighborhoods on the east side, and that we charge people for daily parking and have some type of automated system set up on the web. I don't want to get into any details about that, but essentially we'd have some mechanisms for collecting money for permits to park, and what that money could be used for, because these would be for people who wanted to continue to drive in and park and do what they're doing today. That money would be then used to supplement and pay for the shuttle service, so that it would, in a sense, it would use their money, the people who want to drive, to make it, to facilitate our getting around, and other people, locals and even people who drive in, would then be able to move about the town with these shuttles. So I'd like to kind of see us try to look at that possibility. And again, it'd be weekends and holidays, because that's our primary problem period. And I would also like to suggest we consider prohibiting parking on the roadway on Highway 1. There are several areas, especially around Sam's, which I know is not within our immediate jurisdiction, but there are several areas where people are parking along the side of the highway. This flies in the face of safety, public safety, and our safety personnel trying to move up and down Highway 1. In some cases, there's not even an adequate place for the emergency vehicles for people to pull over to allow emergency vehicles to get through. So I'd like to see us try to do something to keep people off the pavement on Highway 1 and 92. I know that there's been some discussion and there's plans with the county about continuing the Naomi Patridge Trail, connecting up to some county operations. I'd like to see all that get tied together. I'd like to see a minimum 10-foot wide bike path to a pedestrian path. Instead of, in some cases, we've got less than that. We've got 8 feet. We've already got 3 minutes. Okay, I'll make it very quick. Quicker.
A gentler tone there, yeah.
This also would, I'd like to see us promote e-bikes, bike rentals, pedicabs, surreys, all types of pedestrian types of transport at these parking lots, and within the town center to, again, allow people to move, to see that they can be over on this Naomi Patridge Trail moving along while everybody else is sitting stalled in traffic. I think it will kind of build on itself. And then I'd like to see Samtrans kind of step up their access to the coast and provide us with express service, at least Tacoma or Daly City BART, particularly on the weekends, but I'd like to see it in rush hour on weekdays and for both directions, morning and evening.
Great, thank you very much, Walter. Next public speaker, I believe I saw Paulette raise her hand.
Heavy duty on the trail on those bluffs near between Kelly and Poplar, where you know, there's so much erosion and problems. So I am wondering if anyone's paying attention to this and what this will be in terms of you know, our coastal land use, our agreement with what the deal is with the horses and what they're allowed to do, what they are not allowed to do, and if we have any solid agreement, do's and don'ts about that, because I think that that's something that is necessary. Okay.
I think the topic of the horse ranches is probably a topic for a future discussion for the Planning Commission, but I think the question about the Segway use on the bluffs, just given the erosion that we've seen, is probably a legitimate question.
I saw it on Sunday too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Additional public comments, please feel free to make your way to the mic. Harbor Commissioner Brannon. Thank you for joining us tonight.
The public tonight, and I was asked to stop by Loretta Bowman, and some of you probably know her as one of our most avid bicyclists on the coast side. She's the blonde woman that you see everywhere. She is the president of the Coastside Bicycle Coalition and has been for, I think, about 7 years now. And she asked me to deliver a message. So the Coastside Bicycle Coalition would appreciate it if the coastal trail was maintained. The weeds are growing into the trail and it's a fire hazard. She also asked me to mention that the Coastside Bicycle Coalition does not support widening the coastal trail, but we do support maintaining the trail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next public speaker.
Good evening, committee. My name's Mike Ferreira, and I was sitting there, I was thinking that we were going to limit this to questions. So one question I had is that during my attendance at some of the earlier meetings, there was a proposal to 4-lane Highway 1 from Kelly down to Magnolia. And when questioned as to why we would want to do that, since there's no problems there, the answer was that it could facilitate the Boulevard concept. And so I just wanted to ask tonight is the 4-laning from Kelly to Magnolia intrinsic to the Boulevard concept? Thank you.
I'll defer to staff. You can say no.
We don't believe that it is. We're looking forward to the Planning Commission's input to figure out what that Boulevard concept will be.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next speaker. And if you'd like, just to facilitate this, if the next speaker would just like to get up and stand and be prepared, we can keep it moving.
My name is Sylvia DeTombe, and I'm from Half Moon Bay. I was curious, at previous meetings, I heard some discussion of an idea of incorporating Moonridge Apartments in Half Moon Bay. So I'm just wondering if part of the plan is to have a big entrance welcome sign to Half Moon Bay, where that might actually be located possibly in the future, and if we were to be spending a lot of money on an entrance facility, whether that would need to be, more money would need to be spent to move it eventually.
Great, thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Lenny. Oops, did we push? No. I'm Lenny Roberts, Committee for Green Foothills, and this may be a little redundant from what I said we had a meeting this afternoon, but the Boulevard concept for Highway 1, I think, is really a great idea, and you can differentiate Half Moon Bay from the other communities to the north, and as a city all unto its own special character. I think some of the things that really could make it that way are the signage at the entrance, and that would really be at the southern entrance of the city as you come in from the south at the Miramontes Road, which could give a sense of arrival, have something that's a really beautiful entry sign, and maybe some distinctive landscaping, some coastal theme. And we suggested this also. This is also proposed in the Mid-Coast Highway Safety and Mobility Studies. There were 2 of them for the Mid-Coast. And they had some very nice examples of cities that have done that. Another great example is at South Lake Tahoe, that has a really beautiful wooden, kind of a big driftwoody looking sign. So you have this sense of, well, this is a special place as you come into Half Moon Bay, and makes people calm down and hopefully slow down, as well as designing the road to encourage that. And I do think that some 4-laning is not necessarily the best way to make sure traffic gets through safely. I mean, if you can have a design that really keeps people moving at a lower speed but not stopping all the time, it really can facilitate both safety and people's mobility through the city. So the other comment that I had about the process for the improvements to Highway 1 that you're going through the design for, there's one more step in the process, and that's the city has to grant a coastal development permit to that project. So you didn't mention that. I just wanted to remind you of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Jerry Steinberg, Half Moon Bay. I think since Ray has come on the scene, that the issues of a stoplight and the walls have been clarified pretty well. But again, you may want to do something, but you have to be able to do it. And there is a problem, and I'm sure Ray is going to solve it, of wetlands on the Beechwood property, which might not allow, they'd have to be mitigated to allow the highway to be raised to 4 lanes or 2 lanes. And if he can get by that, he might have it done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Do we have any additional public speakers? Great.
I'm Greg Jameson. I'm on the GPAC committee. One of the things I wanted to bring up, it's probably somewhere in the information, but we talked a little bit about having some kind of a parallel transit system maybe in the future that could run along Highway 1. I think it was Walter was an early speaker, but if we had a system planned for long term, that might be a good solution to be moving people north and south up and down the highway where they could park in facilities and make traffic move a lot quicker. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and bring it back to the committee and planning commission. So I think for the purposes of this discussion, similar to before, probably best to just go around the horseshoe and just provide whatever additional comments or direction or feedback that you wish to provide. So this is the sort of opportunity to provide your thoughts on the comments that you've heard, what you like, what you don't, what you'd like to see, and those types of things, recognizing that we have had some discussion already. So with that, open up to Committee Member Brown. And you don't have to feel compelled to make comments either. If you could, I'm sorry, if you could turn your, green is on.
Okay, thanks.
There's a very important element I think, in designing a viable Highway 1, whether it be a boulevard or not, in downtown, especially downtown Half Moon Bay. That's that little spot of 92 between Highway 1 and Main Street. It's huge. It's really important for pedestrians and for bicyclists. It's totally inadequate, and it sorely needs addressing, and I think it should be, if possible, included in the Highway 1 itself, not as a separate project, maybe as a project within the larger project, but it should be addressed. To me, everything's connected. There's transit, there's parking, there's traffic, there's all of these issues from the Caltrans all the way down to Half Moon Bay City are totally interconnected. So I'm not going to go into all that stuff, but I think this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think addressing a Main Street is integral to this as well. If we're going to think about how to get traffic moving, flowing from Highway 1 and maybe 92, especially on weekends, addressing issues on Main Street is essential. I don't think that's, less important.
Very good. Thank you very much. Committee Member Murray?
No comments at the moment.
Great. Thank you very much. Member Dragony?
No comment.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the comments from some of the public here questioning the 4 lanes and the road diet concept. I would be definitely in support of the town boulevard concept, and I think in many instances where we see roadway widening, that is the opposite of the direction that we want to go. That's all.
Very good. Committee Member Endon?
So I'll just second what Ms. Brown said in terms of looking at Highway 92 as well as Highway 1, because weekends are just, as you all know, I don't have to state the obvious, it is all one big issue. And so if possible to include that 1 to Main Street and even Main Street as part of the conversation would be great.
I strongly support the improvements to the
if you could speak directly into the mic, yes.
Do my best.
Just go ahead and bring it right up to your mouth.
All right. So I strongly support that improvement that you talked about at Main and South Main and 92. It's a very dangerous intersection for cyclists. I use it a lot coming off Higgins Canyon. I'm sure many other cyclists do. So I'm strongly supportive of that. And I think as where Michelle was going earlier on, the coming into town from the south on Highway 1 as you start running towards 92 is super dangerous for cyclists. And I think anything we can do to look at that as a conflict with cars and figure out some answers there would be very helpful. No other comments.
Great, thank you very much. Committee Member Fulman now.
I just wanted to stress the importance of where we do currently have multimodal trails or building new trails, that we do where the trails cross over streets, that we have, make it a more of a high visibility crossing at all streets where it crosses. So that would make it easier for bicyclists to move through, and traffic would be able to see that, you know, there might be a bike or pedestrian coming through. I think that's one of the issues with the Naomi Patridge Trail right now. And so just keeping that in consideration for future trails. The other thing was, I do think that the Coastal Trail is a great trail for bicyclists, but I do think it's great to have the option for the Eastside Trail specifically for pedestrians, because it's going to be a much faster access, and especially for the communities that are on the east side.
Great, thank you very much. And before we start the Planning Commission comments, I just wanted to note Commissioner DeMond submitted some comments, and I just wanted to summarize those briefly. His comments will be submitted into the record for the July 11th meeting, but just wanted to make sure I provided a summary for those as he submitted those, and so that we can keep those in consideration. So just some of his key points. He was really interested in making sure that the Boulevard concept was extended north to Surfers Beach, and that we do look at enhancing pedestrian safety across Highway 1 in the northern part of town, so making sure that that we're looking at that area. He expressed some concerns over some policies in the draft, specifically policies number 30 and number 31 regarding performance standards, and that wanted to ensure that those performance standards weren't construed as a means to not address commute times and traffic delays, and expressed concerns that about the widening should be limited to the minimum needed for infrastructure improvements. So his comments there. And then wanted to make the point that growth limits in Half Moon Bay have been kept flat for 15 years, and that improvements in road widening are not in growth inducing, and there's a need for roadway expansion north of Main Street. He's expressed concerns that any town boulevard concept shouldn't impact commute times, and then supports pedestrian improvements like flashing lights, crosswalk patterns, and other methods at key locations. So just wanted to summarize those points of his. Again, those will be submitted in full in the record for the July 11th meeting, and he'll be joining us there. Or no, he will not be joining us at that meeting. So his written comments will be submitted there at that time. So bring it back to the Planning Commission, Commissioner Benjamin.
Okay, so I look forward to debating Les on that at some point. So there's some really good ideas here. First, I appreciate the clarification about where those bright flashing lights can be, and I appreciate Committee Member Foldenauer's comments about the hazards associated with cyclists moving up cross streets. Those are actually the places where I think they're needed the most. I mean, I understand the value of controlled crossing stoplights for Highway 1 itself, but imagine for a moment if you're trying to turn onto Venice or Grand or Kehoe or any of those cross streets, say at dusk, right? And you're looking into this steady glow of headlights in the opposite direction, and you get a break of about 10 seconds. And, you know, one day somebody is going to not see that cyclist, even if their light's flashing, and a lot of them unfortunately don't use them. And it's situations like that where a well-advanced notice could really raise the alarm. You know, I realize it represents a different kind of distraction and hazard, so I understand there's a balancing of risks here, but I really worry about that. To the extent that we could locate the cyclist paths further away from Highway 1, you know, ideally on the access road, it could be much further to the west or to the east, where it must cross. You know, although, again, that poses the risk that a car thinks it can make the gap and come careening, making its turn in a way that brings too much velocity and poses a different hazard. So that was the context in which I was thinking about those flashing lights. With respect to the throughput question, if a car is going to move from one end of town to the other, and there's one lane in each direction at this end, and there's one lane in each direction at that end, the time it takes to get from here to there is going to be defined by the pinch points. It's not going to be defined by how quickly they get to the pocket, right? There's some potential benefit of reducing friction in circulation, and I know that everybody's a road engineer when it comes to congestion. I get that. So maybe I'm just another one. But the idea is that if we were to pursue a boulevard approach that involved one lane that had adequate space for people to pull out of the flow of traffic before they used the side lane. For example, I'm thinking of the Great Highway in San Francisco as a potential example, but maybe there are areas of that that are not as good. I'd have to look back at it. But the idea is that if you could get the traffic out of the way so you're eliminating the friction points, maybe one lane in each direction with all of those added values might not impact your transit times meaningfully. It's something to think about. And I took former Mayor Ferreira's comment about the question of the value of the four-laning to the south in a similar way, not so my question doesn't just pertain to the north. So this is an intriguing idea, but the distinction between what we want as a community for Half Moon Bay, Half Moon Bay's Main Street to mean, and Half Moon Bay's Highway 1 Town Boulevard to mean. You know, is there a design redundancy? Maybe there's an overlap. I want to be sure aesthetically, you know, this is where John probably can give us more insight. My wife points out that my taste is in my mouth, so I defer to other people who have more taste. With respect to design features, I know it hasn't, you know, there was a brief comment about the visuals, since that's the things in the pictures that made you say, oh, this is a good idea, were visual things. In addition to the things that were taking place in the bed of the road, one of the things that has defined Half Moon Bay traditionally has been our beautiful cypress trees. And I think many of us remember the gorgeous cypress tree that was on Highway 92 near Hilltop, and what a sad thing it was when that came down. I understand that Caltrans sometimes regards trees as vertical obstructions, but to the extent that, you know, we're looking at things that define our town, I think those beautifully sculpted trees are among them. So I hope that will come up. I realize that the designs haven't focused at the level of detail that we understand, for example, as Mr. Steinberg mentioned, how we would manage drainage off of a larger right-of-way, whether it's used for road or town boulevard. To the extent that, you know, we avoid putting road tar into environmentally sensitive habitat areas, to the extent that we avoid creating additional drainage that can facilitate erosion. You know, these are issues that we need to work out, and I realize that we're in early stages, so we're not ready to make an assessment about what's feasible, what's not feasible yet. But I want to be sure that if we see that there's an issue, you know, maybe we can turn some of the liabilities into assets. You know, if the road is wider and we have more wash-off, maybe biofiltration can produce higher quality wetlands a little further inward, and we get a different set of values in addition to the boulevard. Because like trees, our open space is one of our great assets that I think our boulevard really should exploit. I also wanted to comment on Mr. Sensing's comment about the jitneys, which I think also Greg mentioned. Again, these, you know, to the extent that these are going to share either the trail on either side, you know, that's a design consideration that I want to be sure that the BPAC has thought about and is ready to buy into. You know, it sounds to me like it could be a really good idea, one of a broad class of demand management ideas that Walter brought out. But if you think that there are ways that producing those things can be more palatable and more compatible with cycling in that area, I hope that we'll get the benefit of your perspective. You know, I'm too arthritic to bike very much anymore, so we'll definitely be interested in your input. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Commissioner Benjamin. Commissioner Evans.
So this evening we're focused, first of all, thank you all for this committee for coming. I understand you haven't met that often yet, so it's probably pretty early for you to have much to say and contribute. Tonight we're really talking about coastal access and bicycle and pedestrian pathways. And it kind of brings in Highway 1 just because that's part of the coastal access. But I'm just going to try to limit what I'm saying to just those things. And I think for me personally, what I would really like to see is some better definitions of what pedestrians mean and what bicycles mean, because for me, it has to do with how fast things are going. So if I'm walking along at my speed of whatever that is, 2 or 3 or 4 miles an hour, and a bicycle goes by me at 15 or 20 miles an hour, that doesn't work very well. Our daughters grew up in Half Moon Bay, and they were used to our little town here, and then our youngest daughter went off to Santa Barbara, and she was used to riding her bike around here, and she got a bicycle there at school, and she was only there a week and ran over somebody because there's all these people and bicycles going amok. And she just felt awful because she wasn't used to how to deal with that, mixing the different scales of things. We see here, or I've been hearing a lot of feedback about solutions, which we're not focused on. We're focused on what I call problem solving, what we call policy here. Half Moon Bay is a pretty small place. We have our Highway 1 is this transportation spine that has coming off of it some lateral things. Some of it's our coastal access. Well, going south from Kelly Avenue, even starting at Poplar, that's kind of a hike to get down to the beach. So going south, it's 11 miles till the next time Highway 1 is where the car is at the beach access. So no wonder everybody wants to come here to go to the beach, because they don't have to hike up and down a cliff. So it's just a geography. And because we just have this spine of Highway 1 with these sort of horizontal accesses, one of them is Highway 92, in the big picture, talking about coastal access and traffic and transportation, it's hard to imagine that realigning Highway 1, even if that were the proper solution, is something that's a realistic kind of plan for us to take on. So what we have to deal with then is, well, what do we do with the congestion that happens in between? And so when I say the town of Half Moon Bay, at the intersection of Highway 92 and Highway 1, it's kind of where the basic necessities for all of us are. And it's there because that's the original, Main Street's the original Highway 1. And that's where, people would come from the south and they'd turn and they'd go over on the 92 trail to get over the hill. So I'm in the middle of town, and it takes me 10 minutes to walk from my office, which is right in the middle of town, to New Leaf. It takes me 10 minutes to walk to the senior center. It's not a big place. So it's really fairly confined. And so most of the solutions that we start hearing about are solutions for much bigger scale. It's like Highway 111 in Palm Desert. It's 20 miles long, and thousands of cars go all the time on that. I think the concept of the town boulevard is a great opportunity to really start redefining what things are we mixing together. Are there, and I was talking about our staff with this a little bit, really the mile kind of circumference of the center of town, around the intersection of Highway 1 and Highway 92, kind of vision it's like a parking lot, or a parking garage, let's say. So people come here like they're going to an event. They're coming to the beach. So if we could imagine, okay, I'm going to a sports event or a concert or something like that, and at that event is this parking garage. And so the parking garage is a certain size, and it only holds a certain number of cars. And when it gets full, theoretically somebody puts up a sign and says, okay, it's full, don't go in. But if nobody puts up the sign, then people keep going in and they keep going in, and then all of a sudden it's full. And then it's so full that they can't even go round and round, look for a place. It's just completely gridlocked. And so then the people that are already in there can't even get out because it's just stuck, because there's only these 3 go in and out. And right next to it is this concert that everybody wants to go to, or this sports event or something. And then, you know, when it's full, you know, you can't get in, you know. Well, it's a town. We can't say to people, you can't come here. You know, we don't have the right to give them a ticket and say you can't come to the coast. So what we have is this sort of geographically confined space that people keep coming to, and it's an enormous challenge to figure out how do we allow folks to get around without having to get into a vehicle when the place is gridlocked. Now, it only happens now and then right now, but I think in a 5 to 30-year plan, it's going to happen often, where in our little town, we need a mechanism for people that are walking or somehow mobile that isn't in a vehicle, or and going at a speed that's a walking kind of speed to get places. And so the concept of a trail system we might want to consider as our policy statement. Let's have a bunch of trails around the town as well, not just up and down the beach or getting to the beach. And there's probably needs to be some policy statements about there are some trails that are this particular tempo of people going, and there's other trails where there's another tempo of people going, and start to make those distinctions. I think we could look to our staff. There's only so much surface area of roadway here, and cars are a particular size, and so I think it's pretty easily identifiable how many cars gridlock our town. I mean, that should be a pretty easy, so we could be talking about facts and not emotional, like, well, I've had to wait, you know, an hour and a half to get to Safeway because I'm sitting in traffic. And so if we had that information, then we could also say, well, people, there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people in each one of these cars. That's not complicated matrix to be saying, if 75,000 cars completely gridlocks the town, then we also know how many people that is and how many people are going to be able to be here. And as a community, we could start talking about how do we want to present our town, what's available to the people that are coming here. And for sometimes when people come here, they're just not allowed to drive certain places because it gridlocks our town. And so we have to sort of start to make a decision, I think, about, even though we have roadways, we may not be letting people drive on them all the time. Otherwise, it gets gridlocked and then it's dysfunctional anyway. So I appreciate your patience listening to that, but I think we're going towards the direction of, like the town boulevard, does that mean a slower tempo? And does that mean, is it an opportunity? I'm sure we'll get lots of suggestions and lots of ideas of how to do that and how to lay it out and where things turn and how that works. And there maybe is lots of other opportunities, not just with signage, but stuff and activities and all kinds of things that make that like Main Street, because it's been there a couple hundred years for wagons and stuff, and it's that size and pace for those things. Maybe Highway 1 also has, I appreciate the people that have been talking about it. It is unique here. I don't know that we have any other cities on the coast that are so close to an urban area that have this transportation intersection of Highway 1 and 92, where, you know, hundreds of thousands of people come every year. And then there's this little kind of farm town stuck right in the middle of it and kind of divided by that. So I think as a community, it presents a great opportunity to really design and do some different concepts with that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I really look forward to this committee expanding what you think about where trails go and how they're used and the different opportunities. And I really support the idea that when we get through our packet, I'm sure we'll be doing that in our meetings where we go through. There's some very good information in here. If any of you have a chance to look through it, if we go point by point through the policies here, it's a fabulous transcription of 2 different iterations of local coastal plans that are really difficult to read and understand. And, you know, very government kind of thing. I apologize if I offended somebody with that. So the information here is just fabulous as you go through section by section, and the policies are really well stated in there. And I look forward that we start going through that. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Evans. Great comments. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for joining us here. Thanks for the discussion and all the great comments from the BPAC and the public. And I think that it was a lot of good feedback, a lot of good comments. I have the blessing and the curse of being both a bicyclist and a commuter on the coast side, so I can see both ends of it. And I also have 2 young kids who are active on their bikes now, 3 and 5 years old, and we were often biking up and down the coast along the coastal trail. Love the coastal trail. Certainly have experienced the concerns about the interruptions along the Naomi Partridge Trail. Absolutely am very concerned about some of the unsafe crossings of that area, particularly well, north of 92, but then some of the intersections down in the Arleta Park area at Milburn or Myrtle and Filbert, and some of those areas are concerns of mine. I have a real interest in seeing my neighborhood, Arleta Park, being better connected to downtown. I have, a hard time just getting to the farmer's market on a Saturday. Getting across 92, getting across Shoreline Station, getting into that area. I mean, it's just there's barriers there. Getting over across Kelly and that sort of thing. But I also recognize that I'm pretty lucky in my neighborhood compared to some of the neighborhoods on the east side. Whether it's south of town near Moonridge or in the areas of Grandview, where they have no pedestrian access whatsoever from their communities into downtown. So I think that's should be a real big focus there. I fully support the Town Boulevard concept, fully support the Eastside Trail concept, and really support just connecting all the different areas of our community. I think we have a really good backbone of a trail network in our town, and there was a lot of focus on it at one point, and we maybe got 65-75% of the way there, and there's just some really key gaps that we need to focus on to really tie in the area. So it's the crossings across Highway 1 at Kelly, it's the getting across 92 at Main Street, it's getting north of Main Street into the communities there, and if we can really tie in those sorts of things, we can really make our community much more or much less auto-dependent. I'm not Pollyannish, and I don't think everybody's just going to suddenly give up their car and bike everywhere, but there's a lot of potential for that, and I know with e-bikes, with a lot of these other technologies that are coming forward, being a regular commuter outside of your car is becoming much more viable. I do also like the concept of having some level of a dedicated lane for some level of alternative transportation. I'm not sure what the possibility of that is, whether Walter's comments on for other mobility, or if there's possibilities for a bus rapid transit lane, a dedicated bus lane that can bring you up and down the coast to particular areas or something along those lines. If that's possible within the widths, I think that would be great. I'm not a traffic engineer or a traffic designer, so I somewhat defer on the concepts of 2 lanes to 4 lanes to just what's most safe and what's easiest to get across, and what's not going to result in a much larger right-of-way. So if there's a design that works within what we have that can accommodate pedestrian access and provide for continuous traffic flow, I'm all for it, whether that's 2 lanes, 4 lanes. My main concern is connectivity. There's a lot of talk about coastal access, and I think that's obviously a big concern because that's a big draw why people come to our town. But I think we also need to keep an eye on downtown access as well, and making sure we're connecting the coast to downtown, that people know where downtown is, that they can get from the coastal trail to downtown in a safe way, and that we're really connecting that tourist economy that comes for the coast side to our businesses downtown. And I think if we're able to do that in a way that people can experience our community and our environment outside of their cars, I think there is a lot of potential there. And I fully support focusing on the sense of place and providing for beautification, signage, and other facilities along Highway 1 that does speak to the quality of Half Moon Bay. And it doesn't right now, and it could. So those are my major comments. I think getting to some of what Commissioner Evans said about slowing down traffic, people moving. I mean, that really gets to some of the concept of traffic demand management and some of the really, again, the little things that can be included to, whether it's striped crossings or signalization, signage, other things to just let people know that they're in a community and there are families crossing Highway 1 and there's people moving about, and folks need to be cognizant of that throughout the stretch of our area. With that, I will bring it back over to Commissioner Benjamin for your comments.
Thanks. So the one topic that hasn't come up tonight that I think we must recognize is that Half Moon Bay is an intermediate space between people traveling on Highway 92 and people going to the unincorporated coastal areas to the north and south. And I think it's important for us to make an observation about that, in that personally I don't think it's our job to fall on our sword to facilitate additional capacity to get there, but I also don't want to damage that capacity in a dramatic way. I want to be respectful, but I think it's very easy in the name of throughput to really divide our town, and I don't think that serves the interests of cyclists or pedestrians. I don't think it supports the sense of place, but I think in our planning process we want to recognize that, take that into consideration as we're thinking through our process, and I just hadn't heard it tonight, so I wanted to get it on the record.
Great, thank you for that. So with that, I will go ahead and bring it back to staff for some comments on next steps.
Yes, and thank you. We thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. Just checking in with the commission because you sounded rather close to able to perhaps provide some direction on proceeding with Town Boulevard and the Eastside Parallel Trail, or would you rather hold until your next session on July 11th?
What does that mean? Am I good?
I didn't mean that in a metaphysical kind of a way. I just, so why don't I just make a motion that that Planning Commission, I move that the Planning Commission direct staff to proceed to investigate the Town Boulevard concept and to pursue design of the trail on the east side adjacent to Highway 1.
Would you like to add all trail possibilities, so it's...
That's beyond the scope of what's noticed, so I think we just have to go with that.
So do I hear a second on that?
Before there's a second, can there be discussion, or is that...
Absolutely. We can have just... Or... Okay. So no.
Go ahead, do you want to?
Well, the motion will be off the table. Right. Yeah. You can have a discussion, but the motion will be off the table.
Okay. Okay, we'll bring it back to discussion to the commission. Commissioner Evans.
I'd like to see the staff be able to study as much as they possibly can for us with the options of the boulevard and different trail connections, not necessarily just a parallel trail to Highway 1.
So
a little bit of addition to your...
Yeah, it's not that I don't care about those things. I'm just reading what's noticed. So we're not supposed to be making motions beyond what's noticed because the public hasn't had an opportunity to comment. In fact, many members of the public haven't had a chance to comment. So let me get a sense from the attorney about the scope of this. I mean, it's not, John, it's not that I don't want to talk about other trails. I just want to do it right.
Didn't they get this packet we have? The public?
Can,
Well, we're not acting.
So I guess it could fit at the end of the paragraph. It says also included discussion of other topics pertinent to coastal access. So it could fall within.
And I guess I would I mean, we are developing a trails master plan, and there is the broader coastal access chapter of the local coastal land use plan. So there's a number of different areas where I guess the broader trail connections would be addressed. Is that an accurate statement?
I would think so. I mean, we have the BPAC right now looking at the broad collection. That's not in front of us tonight, but it's
So
not.
Yeah. So my point was just that your motion wouldn't necessarily preclude any additional motions in the future. Jill.
what we were seeking was confirmation of the GPAC's consensus statements. It is okay to go beyond that. The agenda was specifically drafted that way because we anticipated that there would be tangents and all kinds of other discussions around this. So I would really appreciate the motion to specifically include these two items, but if there is additional material that is in the coastal access and recreation chapter that you just received, relevant to it, it is okay to add that on. Of course, we're going to look at it more on July 11th and after that.
Okay, so let me try this again, John. So I move that the Planning Commission direct staff to affirm the consensus position of the GPAC with respect to exploring the Town Boulevard concept. Thank you for putting that up. And to pursue the investigation, the study of the Eastside parallel trail, and to consider other trails as referenced in the draft document, not as confirmation that those are the designs we want, but just that we would like to explore them. How's that?
I'll second that.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. We have direction. We've closed the. With that, I will adjourn the joint study session. No, wait, sorry, Jill. You still need to go to next steps.
So we have next steps for the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Tentatively, we're looking at your next session on August 24th. We aren't ready to come back to you July because there's a whole lot of information gathering going on, including the online survey that went live today. Bridget, how many people have already buzzed into that? It's impressive.
I think I've had like at least 7 responses since
Within,
about
like,
3 o'clock, like within 2 hours.
Yeah,
People have been commenting, so.
So it's great. It's a map-oriented survey, so we hope you all give it a try and share your feedback about that. That survey will be online until September 1st. If you've been riding or walking on the coastal trail, you may have noticed the rubber tubes on the trail near Poplar Beach. Those are tubes that our dear Hugh and Dora put out some time ago. And they've been counting the bicycle riders. They picked them up today. Yes? No? You will soon. Okay, they're going to pick them up soon, get their first data download, and then they'll go back out again. And we've never had real counts. So when the BPAC meets again, you're going to have all kinds of data, really good, interesting data. And we'll share it with the Planning Commission, of course, as well. But please encourage folks to go to hmboutdoors.org and to work on that online map survey. And we'll be in touch with the BPAC in advance of your next session and confirm the date for that. But that is a fourth Thursday, which we're sort of settling on for you. All right. Commission. Well, your immediate next step is we're going to adjourn this session and then open your Planning Commission, the rest of your agenda for tonight. But in advance of that, we want everyone here to know that this discussion of coastal access and recreation, the revised working draft is what we're calling it. It's a working draft for the behalf of the Planning Commission's oversight of this portion of the local coastal land use plan. Our intention is to continue the discussion on July 11th. We do have some regular business that night, so it may need to be a little bit limited. July 25th, we will pick it up again, and I actually believe we will need to continue on August 8th, and we don't have regular business queued up for August 8th. So we would really like to work our way through it very carefully, and in the meantime, we're preparing other sections for our Planning Commission. So those are both of your groups, and staff appreciates your patience with how this meeting logistics occurred, where we don't do a lot of joint sessions. And Vice Chair Holt, thank you. You ran a great meeting. We really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So with that, thank you everybody for being here. We're going to adjourn the joint study session, and we will continue on with regular Planning Commission business, but we can take a 5-minute break or so. Everybody can feel free to stay for the rest of it. Otherwise, have a good evening. We were just talking about you today, actually. About that stuff with Sean. Oh, were you? We just put out an NOP on concrete. Oh, you did? We're kind of moving towards the next steps about, how do we implement the trails and all that sort of stuff. Oops, that's not my so what's the next? Oh, cool. Yeah. That is exciting. That's my old title. I just got these. That's right. I didn't know Post had a regional trails person. Well, it's fairly new. Yeah, so I'm just launching a program. That's good, because I've seen other ones where they drop them off at a cow ranch or something like that. And they come to us. Yeah. I'm actually thinking of I'd love to show you our vision and our concept about it. And then we can all the players along the way. Just kind of figure out what's the yeah, so well, the trail. I met with planning today to talk about this, and then I did. sort of stuff like that that would work. So it's good. It's nice to hear kind of everybody kind of coalescing around the same sort of. Yeah, no, we really love it. And sometimes it's like more trails means that's really right. So anyways, yeah, it's good to see. Of course, we're kind of at this. These are the people who show up. Right.
So is it better to? I mean, I obviously have your contact.
Do you?
Parks, but do you have contact here? In this.
Yeah, I mean the parks. Probably the best.
Okay, I didn't know if you prefer to just keep it separate or if that's even necessary.
It's just,
okay, cool.
I paid more attention to that email than I do my other. My world's split.
Yeah.
The one foot on each side of the place.
I know. I forgot that you lived here. I remember being out in Concord and you saying you live in Half Moon Bay. I'm like, that's crazy. But now I'm doing it.
Well, you're actually better with me.
Yeah. I mean, I just hate the hours. It's sort of like, now it'll be great to drive home.
It's actually not too bad. It's still a commute.
Yeah, right.
It's pretty terrible around like trying to drive Highway 13, like pretty much I don't know, anytime between like 7 in the morning till 10. It's like locked up all the way to Redwood Road. So it's like all these complaints about Highway 1. It's like pretty good.
I mean, it could be better, but it's not so bad.
I mean, when it's a sunny weekend, sure it sucks.
Yeah. That was actually, I'm not going to make a comment now, but one thing I thought of at the end is how like tourism can play a role in this. It really
So
sounds like this
that's
is
why I say that's why I think we big opportunity to be able to connect with the regional open spaces. There's so many people who flood into town who go biking or they just bypass right now. And you see them on like a sunny Sunday night, they're sitting in traffic lights. It's like there's restaurants. It's kind of pushing out, and it's like you think about like photographs or something outdoor rec culture. We haven't done that well yet. People are talking about it.
Yeah, and then it creates an internal community of your home that then increases the livability, and I mean that tourism can create culture here.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. What's the culture?
Yeah.
What's the sense of place?
Right.
Are we a Ritz-Carlton community? Are we like a bedroom Ritz community? Nobody who lives here wants that. We have the type of tourism facilities that we also like, which is
Trails and outdoors. Right. So it's
it's a
ingrained
win-win.
in how everyone locally uses it, but it's how you create that space for it.
Yeah, we've been talking about it quite a bit. Actually, Debbie, right? She's there. She's all on board with that. We've had a lot of she's mentioned talking to Post a bit about potentially some land transfers to different areas that could create like staging or trail access in downtown for that would potentially give us a program and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the questions.
I'd love to be involved in those discussions.
Yeah,
too.
sounds good.
Cool. So
Enjoy. Good to see you. Take
Yeah,
care.
I'll be in touch.
Have a good drive.
other plate to this plate, now it's still on your plate.
So easy to good. There's some continuity there for sure. So it's nice to sort of.
Right.
Yeah, I've got to work hard, but you can feel free to contact me there.
I'm sure there's.
So for me, that image of come up Highway 1, oh no, I've got to drive through the town. I'm not staying on any.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, to the extent I can, or whatever. You know, within the constraints of what's appropriate or all that. All right, I'm gonna rein this back in.
I agree. Exactly.
You guys ready to blast this out?
There you go. Okay, yeah, all right, thank you so much. Okay, all right.
Okay, we're gonna reconvene the Planning Commission meeting. So we'll open our regular Planning Commission meeting. You're the squeaky wheel. So a couple of additional items. Moving on to the approval of minutes of June 13th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next we have a staff report on Planning Commission bylaws.
We defer to the commission. If you have any questions about these, let us know.
Through the chair.
Are there any additional questions? Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes, I know that we are in the process. There's been some legal review. Due respect to the legal review we've gotten so far, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to get additional legal review over a bit of time. If there's an urgent need to get them in right away, that's great. If there isn't, I'd kind of like to get the benefit of some extra eyes on it, just because I think the council would appreciate it.
I will pass that on. I'm going to move the item to the city clerk, depending on what your vote is, but I will pass that comment on about legal review.
Okay, so with that, is there a motion? Do we continue to have this on the Planning Commission agenda? Is that what you're?
I would table this for now, but if other people want to move it, I understand.
Not hearing a motion. We will table. So moving forward to the planning manager report. Okay, going back.
Are we saying that we have not conveyed these at this point? I just need to be clear.
Yeah, my view is I'd like to get some additional perspective. We have some evolution taking place. It's not that I don't want something to happen. I just want to send them something that makes sense to me. And I'm not quite there yet.
Okay, so what I think I heard this time is
legal review before you see them again.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Can't wait to have version 4. Okay.
It's not, and it's not that it's not important, it's that the LCP stuff is so much more important to me, to be candid. That's kind of where I am.
It doesn't matter. Okay. So we're good with that.
Okay, so we're good to move forward to planning manager report?
All right, very briefly, tomorrow we have a director's hearing with those 2 garages we've been telling you about. July 11th, the Jenna Lane project is coming your way. It's been noticed. And we wanted to speak a little bit more about marching through your July and August sessions relative to the LCLUP. So first of all, for July 11th, since you have regular business that night, would you prefer to simply take the LUP item after the Jenna Lane item, or would you prefer an earlier start time or any other adjustments to the agenda for that?
Oh, I have the luxury of working from home, so I'm flexible, but I don't know if Chair Hernandez it's as easy for him, and I don't know whether that works for Brian. So
We'd suggest, let's go ahead and do a 7 o'clock start and have Jenna Lane go first, and then we'll just see how much time is left until 10 o'clock. And use the time we have is what we would recommend doing. And then we're going to come back on July 25th. We may bring the Parks and Recreation Commission in relative to the recreation side of that document. We would like to do a similar thing because we have a master plan going on at the same time as well. And that consultant would appreciate this input as well. So I know it's a laborious type of meeting because we have a lot of extra people to go through, and it takes some time, but we're just concerned because you've got a newly seated Parks Commission that they see this right now before you get way ahead of them. So that's the thinking. We thought this was quite successful. So anyway.
Through the chair, one comment.
Commissioner Benjamin.
So I have no idea how Jenna originally came to us, and it spawned a great deal of public controversy. Obviously we don't have the document yet, so we don't know where it's going to be or what it's going to be. But in terms of managing our priorities, I want to know if staff is comfortable once we look at the document. If we, obviously if people want to speak, we need to give them all of the time they need to speak. But if we feel like we're in a, puzzle solving mode at that point to say, we're kind of, we've expanded our envelope and we're opening the backside and trying to figure out how to figure out a solution, I'd rather continue that item and get to the LCP stuff than get caught up in trying to fix it. And I know that's hard for staff because it carries the item. It's sort of another thing in your memory to carry to another meeting. And it may be hard on the applicant, but I think that's an appropriate management of our resources given the importance of making progress on the LCP if the Jenna Lane item is really complicated and demands, if it's going to demand 2 hours and we start at 9 o'clock on a really complicated LCP item, we're just not going to get our best brain on it. And I don't want to, this is just too important to make that mistake.
Okay, we appreciate that. I do want to share again, August 8th is looking like a free and clear night with respect to regular business unless that particular item might be continued. So we're trying to carve out as much as we can. I would like to move on to another section by your second August meeting, and we'll talk to you about how we're doing on that next week. Now, I'm looking for a little bit of feedback on the, not the content of the document you received, but on a few structural items. about it because we tried very hard to give you the breadcrumbs you needed to go from the 1993 LCLUP to the first public draft document to this one, and also anticipating what the next one's going to look like. We stripped away a lot of formatting. We put shall in bold so everyone can see where that occurs and when it was put back in or when we actually proactively added it. So there are a number of things about that and notes to readers, etc. And so as we're preparing the rest of these, we just would like to know whether you know it tonight or not at the next meeting, if that's what you want. It's very helpful. We want to give you something that is useful.
For me, it was easy to read through, surprisingly brief for the amount of information that was in there, and I really liked the format. And I like that you had the policies were clear and succinct and made references that we could look to some other way. I personally really liked that.
So the best way I would describe it is thought integrated. That is, to take those concepts from those different documents and find a way to merge them into coherent statements that were easy to digest and you could look back to see where it was, it is an incredible amount of work to do that. And so my hat's off to you for that work.
That's the GPAC. That's...
No, ma'am, that's you.
No. The GPAC was amazing. Yeah, they were incredible. Okay, so that helps. I will keep doing that. A couple more things. Bridget has a gift.
Is it worth more than $50?
That's great. Is that some sort of subtle type of...
We want it distinguishable from your first public draft, and we will tab it up over time. What we encourage you to do is insert the document you received in your last packet. She has a title page to cue that up. No, you're gonna. This is your binder. We can also do the tune-up. But we would encourage you to, I think, didn't you do the comment summary? You put that in there? Yeah, okay. The newest one is in there. And then what's the other thing? Here.
This one's been...
So the first thing is the coastal access, which you received tonight, or you actually received on Friday with this packet. And then the second thing is the Coastal Commission LCP update guidance guide that you got on May 23rd Planning Commission meeting, so you can insert that. And then the last and final thing is the consolidated comments, which you received last meeting, but we've since revised it. It's much cleaner and easier to follow, so you can get rid of the old one and replace it with this one that's in your binder currently. So this will be a working draft process. That's why you have handwritten little tabs and so forth, but eventually we'll have like nice tabs for you as we move along, so.
Through the chair, this is a testament to your great organizational capability and your recognition of at least my minimal organizational capability. So thank you very much for this.
And we can update it whenever.
Yep.
Just bring it by. We can copy it.
We're still dividing up the document into chunks, and so I'm sorry to say I don't know how many sections there will be yet, so we'll see that soon. And then finally, we have an announcement about some consulting support that we are in negotiations with Charles Lester, the former executive director of the California Coastal Commission staff. And honestly, it was amazing to meet Mr. Lester and to share with him where we were with Plan Half Moon Bay and the local coastal land use plan. and he will start working with staff to provide guidance from his unique perspective on where we are with each of these sections. In particular, I'd like his input after we incorporate the GPAC's comments, because that is our charge, is to make all of that work to the best of our ability, and then moving documents through you, you will have the wisdom that he can bring to this. So we're very excited.
Very nice. That's great news. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the care and feeding of planning commissioners. That's important. So with that, moving on to planning commission communications. Are there any communications to report?
Nothing.
I've got nothing. Seeing nothing, I believe we can move to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.